From the observation deck, their stillness was almost insulting. Humans, diminutive and fragile-looking, lined the simulation floor like inert statues, their faces unreadable, their limbs taut but relaxed. For cycles, we, the instructors of countless species, had assumed silence equaled fear. Perhaps it was arrogance, perhaps ignorance. We catalogued their every twitch, every micro-adjustment, every hesitation, yet we could not predict the tempo of their minds. The logs illuminated truths that our ocular arrays cannot. Each battle replay flickered across our screens in a mosaic of chaos and carnage. And within that chaos, the humans did not speak. They did not shout commands, nor did they plead, panic, or even flinch in the way other species would have. At first, we attributed it to stoicism, a primitive attempt to appear composed, but the logs revealed a more terrifying pattern. Every pause, every deliberate stillness concealed thought processes operating beyond the limits of our calculations. They waited, they observed, they absorbed variables that would have overwhelmed our most advanced neural predictors. In one skirmish, a human soldier remained pinned beneath the wreckage of a collapsed training drone, broken limbs threatening to shatter their focus. The sensors recorded elevated stress markers, but not panic. With methodical precision, the human leveraged debris, recalibrated their balance, and neutralized a threat to their squad. Silent, deliberate, flawless. A nearby comrade fell, the scene bathed in red light and the hiss of cooling fluids. Still, no cry, no lamentation, only a quiet adjustment of stance, a reevaluation of surroundings, and continued execution. Our predictive algorithms failed at every turn. They did not merely survive, they adapted, they learned, they evolved mid-combat. The most disconcerting discovery came when reviewing encounters where humans faced multiple simultaneous threats. Aliens far superior in size and strength were incapacitated almost instantly, yet the humans responded with uncanny coordination, anticipating maneuvers that even we could not have imagined. Their silence, previously a nuisance to our instruction methods, was revealed as an instrument of calculation. Speech would have fragmented their focus. Observation and intuition were their guides. As instructors, we experienced an unprecedented mixture of awe and dread. The human's tactical mind, resilient to injury and unbroken by loss, approached a level of efficiency that bordered on the divine. They were rewriting the rules of engagement in real time, often in ways our collective experience could not explain. We realized that all our assumptions about fear, weakness, predictability were obsolete. Their quiet contained storms we could neither predict nor control. In one final sequence, a human squad faced overwhelming odds in a virtual urban landscape. Explosions tore through walls. Our projections anticipated chaos-induced collapse. Yet the humans did not retreat, did not panic, did not falter. Instead, they communicated through glance and gesture, executing maneuvers with perfect synchronicity. A single soldier vaulted from a collapsing scaffold to intercept an ambushing opponent, a move that defied kinematics yet succeeded flawlessly. Another, struck by a plasma shard, twisted mid-fall, deploying a countermeasure that neutralized two threats simultaneously. By the time the engagement ended, the humans were standing, unbroken, unshaken, having turned what should have been their demise into a tactical victory. For the first time, we felt genuine fear, not for our lives, for we were safe observers, but for the limitations of our own comprehension. The human silence was not absence, it was an active force, a reservoir of instinct, logic, and adaptability. We could no longer see them as students. We were witnesses to an intelligence and courage that transcended instruction. Every subsequent log we reviewed reinforced the same truth. Humans were not predictable, nor controllable, nor weak. They were a storm held in pause, a storm whose magnitude we had only just begun to perceive. And in that realization, a chilling question arose. If we, with all our experience, could not anticipate their next move in controlled simulations, what might they achieve beyond these walls, beyond these tests, beyond our observation? The logs ended, but the answer, unfathomable, silent, and patient, lingered in the hum of our consoles. We, the instructors, were no longer guides. We were witnesses. And for the first time, the humans held dominion over our comprehension. A soft alarm chimed. Another batch of combat logs had arrived, labeled simply, with no fanfare, from a theater we had yet to monitor. And as we opened the files, our sensors captured the first anomaly, an encounter the humans had recorded themselves, unscripted, unmonitored. The pattern we had begun to discern, the silent mastery, the calm before impossible maneuvers, was only the beginning. The question remained, what would they do when the silence broke? From the orbital station, the humans appeared almost insignificant,
a handful of fragile forms scattered across the alien terrain below. Our sensors ticked numbers, calculated probabilities, ran simulations, all converging on the inevitable. Humans would falter. Yet even as we prepared contingencies, a tremor of unease rippled through our observation team. There was a stillness in their movements, a patience that suggested something we could not quantify. The alien forces descended with coordinated precision, their ranks a terrifying display of size, strength, and technological supremacy. Conventional protocol dictated that the humans would scatter, panic, or fall beneath overwhelming firepower. Instead, they held positions, their stance unflinching, unbroken. Then, almost imperceptibly, they began to move, not in chaos, but in a fluid choreography that confounded every algorithm.
One human sprinted along jagged terrain, vaulting over molten fissures that should have been impassable. Another dismantled an alien drone mid-flight, using debris and improvised tools as extensions of their body. It was not recklessness, it was calculation. Their timing, their instinctive adaptation, exceeded the predictive range of our neural arrays. The humans seemed to anticipate not just our forces, but the anticipations of our anticipations. Every assault, every counter, unfolded with near supernatural foresight. Our own soldiers hesitated. They had trained for years, yet here, confronted with improvisation that defied their understanding, they froze. The humans, in contrast, advanced like a living algorithm, each action analyzed, each risk absorbed, each casualty integrated into the next maneuver. Where one human fell, another adjusted instantly, closing gaps and covering weaknesses with seamless precision. We observed them adapting to environmental anomalies, lava flows, collapsing structures, electromagnetic disruptions, not as obstacles, but as tools. Psychological pressure designed to intimidate became irrelevant. The humans did not flinch. They observed our movements, mirrored them, then twisted them into entirely new patterns. By mid-engagement, they were rewriting the battle itself. Individual bravery was compounded by a collective intelligence we had never recorded. There was no need for spoken commands. Their communication transcended language, transmitted through gestures, eye contact, and instinctual timing. Even the smallest adjustments carried the weight of strategy, the foresight of the entire unit. Our own analysis could not keep pace. We, their instructors, were no longer guides, but spectators, watching a species transform every disadvantage into advantage. We noted a human using the wreckage of a downed alien transport as a defensive rampart, turning it into an impromptu firing position while simultaneously protecting two allies. Another created a makeshift signal that lured enemy reinforcements into a controlled kill zone. There was creativity, improvisation, and ruthlessness, all bound together in a pattern that defied every precedent. They were not following protocol, they were inventing it mid-battle. Casualties occurred as they always do, yet no human fell without impact. Every loss was analyzed in real time, adjustments made instantaneously, mistakes converted into new tactics. By the end of the first hour, the humans had survived scenarios that would have decimated any other species. Their resilience was astonishing, terrifying. Each movement seemed predicated on a silent calculus that none of our sensors could capture, none of our algorithms could predict. As the engagement reached its climax, humans executed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They climbed sheer cliffs under fire, neutralized superior foes through coordinated improvisation, and turned environmental hazards into lethal assets. The alien forces, initially confident and dominant, began to retreat under pressure we had not anticipated. Our own units, programmed to assess risk and respond optimally, faltered in confusion, unable to comprehend the logic underpinning human action. We felt awe, yes, but also fear. The battlefield had become a classroom, yet the lesson was not for them. It was for us. Humanity's silence, its patience, its uncanny adaptability demonstrated capabilities that transcended language and surpassed all prediction. They did not merely fight, they evolved in real time, becoming more than the sum of their parts, rewriting tactical doctrine on the fly. And yet, as we celebrated our observations with quiet murmurs of disbelief, the humans paused. A shadowed ridge loomed ahead, unexplored by both our sensors and theirs. Their attention shifted toward it, silent, calculating. Every motion slowed, every glance sharpened, as if they were sensing danger that lay beyond the limits of observation. Our monitors flagged anomalous readings, something new approaching, something unanticipated.
The humans, poised on the threshold of the unknown, did not hesitate. They waited, they observed, and we, their alien instructors, felt the first true tremor of unease, not for their survival, but for the very predictions we had relied upon. The field was no longer ours to interpret. The humans were writing the next chapter themselves, and we had no idea what it would contain. The ridge shuddered faintly, dust and debris spilling from its crevices. Sensors could not yet identify the source. The humans crouched, ready but silent. Their eyes, reflecting alien suns, seemed to understand something we could not. And in that silence, a new calculation formed. Not ours to command, but theirs. The first true test of their field deployment had ended, yet the next engagement, unseen and unrecorded, was already unfolding. We stared, riveted, knowing one certainty: the humans would not merely survive it, they would define it. Reports arrived in waves, each more unsettling than the last. Human squads had survived encounters where even elite alien units had fallen in droves, where entire contingents of our finest strategists were reduced to fragmented shadows of themselves. The data streams were clean, precise, yet horrifyingly consistent. We were summoned to the council chambers, a vast elliptical space suspended in the void, where elder commanders waited, eyes bright with impatience and something darker, doubt. Our simulations, which had been flawless against every other species, failed catastrophically when applied to humans. Probability models collapsed under the weight of their improvisation. Predictive algorithms offered no insight. We could describe their movements, note their patterns, yet we could not anticipate them. How, we were asked, could we quantify the weaknesses of a species that appeared to have none?
How could we predict failure points in beings who turned every error into advantage? How could we control a force that refused to be contained? As we presented our findings, a subtle unease settled over the council. Murmurs spread through the chamber, fragments of disbelief, confusion, and fear. Even we, the instructors, began to doubt our ability to measure them. Humans were adaptive on a scale that blurred the line between instinct and conscious evolution. When adversity struck, they did not panic. When surrounded, they did not flee. They converted every hazard, every loss, every unpredictable variable into tactical superiority. Our doctrine, centuries in the making, failed to account for such mechanical precision combined with fluid creativity. Some among us began observing in secret. From hidden satellites and cloaked recon drones, we scrutinized the humans more closely than ever before. Micro-adjustments in stance, imperceptible shifts in breathing, tiny flickers of eye contact, they spoke volumes. These beings operated like a hive, yet each retained individuality. Their coordination was organic, yet precise. Actions that seemed spontaneous were simultaneously part of a larger, invisible network of strategy. Logic, probability, and conventional rules of warfare bent around them, unable to capture their rhythm. The council's unease deepened as we presented our observations. Questions multiplied like spores. If humans could outperform our most disciplined units, what could they do when faced with the galaxy itself? Could a species so small, so unassuming, challenge the vast hierarchies of power that it held for millennia? Could they destabilize planets, fleets, even entire systems with nothing but ingenuity and relentless determination? We realized in that suspended chamber of scrutiny and expectation that our answer would no longer remain theoretical. Humans were approaching a threshold none of our kind had witnessed, a tipping point of influence that could ripple across galaxies. They did not merely survive, they evolved continuously in real time, bending every circumstance to their will. The silence we once misunderstood as passivity had always been preparation, a latent force gathering strength, calculating angles we could not perceive. In the corners of the chamber, some council members shifted uneasily. Senior strategists whispered about contingency fleets, preemptive strikes, and the dangers of underestimating the unknown. Yet the truth, unspoken but undeniable, lingered in the hum of the data streams. Humans could not be contained by conventional measures. Their resourcefulness was infinite, their courage unquantifiable, their adaptability a force that defied doctrine. Even our most advanced simulations could not capture the depth of their potential. In secret, we continued to observe.
Every human squad, every maneuver, every subtle adaptation was recorded, dissected, and analyzed.
And yet, with every observation, the gap between understanding and comprehension widened. We could map the battlefield, identify hazards, measure reaction times, but never the true calculus behind their decisions. The humans seemed to anticipate variables that did not yet exist, shifting their tactics in anticipation of outcomes before we had even modeled them. As we left the council chamber, the questions remained unanswered, echoing through the corridors of command. How far could they go? What would they achieve once the thresholds of controlled observation were left behind? Could they challenge civilizations larger, older, and infinitely more experienced than themselves? The answers were unknowable, yet the warning was clear. The humans were no longer an anomaly to be managed. They were a force to be reckoned with. Outside, the stars stretched across the void like silent witnesses. Somewhere, on a distant, uncharted planet, human squads trained, observed, adapted. We could feel the tremor of their potential, an energy that resonated far beyond simulations, far beyond doctrine. A species so small, yet capable of altering the balance of galactic power. Quiet, patient, calculating, unstoppable in ways we could barely perceive. And in that realization, a shadow passed over the council chambers. Not literal, but metaphorical, a chilling recognition of the unknown. Humanity was no longer a subject of study. They were a question. And questions, as we knew, demanded answers that often arrived too late. The monitors flickered with new reports, anomalies in distant sectors, movements that could only be human. And as we stared, transfixed, we understood. The tipping point was not approaching. It had begun. The planet below was a crucible of fire and ruin. Mountains of debris smoldered under alien bombardments, shattered cities groaned under the weight of collapsing towers, and rivers of molten metal twisted through scarred landscapes. From our orbital stations, the humans appeared minuscule, fragile shapes in a storm of destruction. Conventional wisdom predicted panic. Our metrics, elevated stress readings, critical casualty reports, environmental hazard indexes, indicated imminent collapse. Yet the humans remained calm, almost serene, as though chaos itself were their ally. We watched as the first wave of alien forces descended, confident in their overwhelming superiority. The humans did not retreat. They did not scatter. Instead, they moved with deliberate precision, weaving through debris-strewn streets, analyzing terrain in real time, and repurposing every obstacle into an instrument of defense. A collapsed transport vehicle became a barricade. Twisted metal became an improvised weapon. Explosives abandoned by retreating units were reconfigured, detonated with timing that neutralized enemy formations rather than scattering them. Then, they struck. Counterattacks erupted simultaneously from multiple vectors, synchronized with a precision that our simulations had deemed impossible. Alien forces, previously confident in their tactical dominance, faltered under the human assault. Every strike, every maneuver, appeared choreographed yet instinctive. Individuals acted with courage that bordered on recklessness, yet it was guided by an unspoken collective intelligence. We began to understand the purpose behind their silence and training. Speech, we realized, would have slowed their cognition, diluted their focus. In silence, humans operated on levels beyond our comprehension, blending observation, intuition, and raw decision-making into a seamless execution. Each fallen comrade was not a loss. They were data, lessons immediately integrated into the next move. Pain was transformed into strategy. Desperation became opportunity. One human squad, trapped within a crumbling industrial complex, rigged falling beams to collapse precisely onto pursuing alien units, using the rubble as cover to advance further. Another, surrounded on three sides, adapted improvised flamethrowers from leaking fuel lines, turning the advancing enemies back with lethal efficiency. Every action reinforced the impression of a species that thrived under adversity, converting every disadvantage into a tactical advantage. As the battle reached its climax, humans executed maneuvers that defied expectation. They climbed fractured walls while under fire, neutralized technologically superior units through ingenuity rather than brute force, and turned environmental hazards into weapons. Our instruments could track movements, record impacts, log outcomes, but could not interpret the underlying calculus driving these actions. Probability, prediction, even probability matrices failed utterly.
By the final hour, the battlefield was a tableau of destruction, yet the humans stood, exhausted, injured, yet unbroken. Alien units that had previously seemed unstoppable were scattered, disorganized, or retreating. We, the observers, felt a chilling mixture of awe and fear. This was no longer a lesson in combat training. It was a revelation in the nature of survival. The humans' willpower, ingenuity, and adaptability were forces that could neither be predicted nor contained. As orbital cameras zoomed in, we witnessed something more profound than victory. Humans were not merely surviving, they were redefining the concept of triumph. Survival was no longer a function of strength or technology. It was a product of cognition, creativity, and indomitable spirit. The battlefield, once a measure of physical dominance, had become a testament to the resilience of the human mind. We exchanged silent glances across the observation decks. For the first time, our role as instructors had vanished. We were spectators of a force beyond comprehension.
And in the aftermath, as fires burned and dust rose into the alien sky, a new realization settled over us. Humans did not just endure, they transformed every test into a demonstration of their superiority, their courage, and their uncanny capacity for adaptation. And yet, even as the echoes of battle faded, the humans did not relax. Their eyes scanned the horizon, their movements cautious yet assured, as if they sensed another challenge approaching, one we had not yet detected. Our sensors flickered, registering anomalies too subtle to classify. The humans paused briefly, silent and poised, a storm contained in measured breaths. The question lingered across every comms channel, every data stream, every mind present in our observation towers. If this was merely a single skirmish, what might they achieve when the stakes were even greater? What limits existed for a species that could turn desperation into strategy and survival into triumph? The planet fell silent for a heartbeat, the battlefield littered with both wreckage and the impossible. The humans had survived, yes, but they had also taught a lesson that would resonate far beyond this world. And as we recalibrated sensors, replayed the logs, and tried, and failed, to anticipate the next move, a single truth crystallized. Humanity's definition of victory was no longer measurable by conventional metrics. It was a force unto itself. From the shadows of the orbital stations, we understood the first true danger of underestimating them. The humans had rewritten the rules. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the ruined cityscape, a new threat approached, and the humans, silent and calculating, would meet it on their own terms. The battlefield had fallen silent, yet the echoes of human triumph lingered in our minds like a pulse we could not trace. Away from the chaos of combat, we turned to observation of a different kind. Not simulations, not logs of engagement, but the intangible patterns that defined human existence. We scoured their philosophy, myths, histories, and art, piecing together fragments of a species that had thrived against every conceivable adversity. Humans revered struggle. Their stories celebrated ingenuity, endurance, and defiance. They did not shrink from hardship. They courted it, studied it, and turned it into opportunity. Every narrative was a blueprint for resilience. Every legend told of a trial survived, a loss endured, a lesson converted into strength. Even their silences, we realized, carried meaning. A quiet stare, a pause before action, a breath drawn between challenges. It was all communication, a dialogue with the universe itself. We, who had conquered countless worlds and dominated numerous species with intellect and force, found ourselves humbled. Humans faced mortality with determination, not despair. They confronted threats beyond comprehension with courage that was neither blind nor arrogant. It was deliberate, calculated.
Rooted in an understanding of the limits of control, and then a surpassing of those limits. Every action reflected a species that had mastered fear without surrendering to it. Through long observation, patterns became clear. Humans did not merely survive, they transformed their environment into a proving ground. Desolate worlds became laboratories of ingenuity. Ruins became bastions of defense. Adversity itself became a tool, a stimulus for evolution. Creativity, emotional depth, and adaptability were fused into a singular force, an unpredictable matrix of instinct and intellect that defied classification. It became evident why humans had remained silent during training and even in battle. Words were insufficient vessels for the magnitude of thought and strategy surging through them. Language would have slowed them, diluted their focus. They spoke in motion, in gesture, in intuition. Every decision was simultaneous with countless others, a mesh of instinct and calculated foresight beyond our algorithms. The revelation unsettled us profoundly. Here were beings so physically fragile, so young in the cosmic timeline, yet capable of challenging entire doctrines of galactic warfare. Their courage illuminated the flaws in our assumptions, their intelligence revealed the limitations of our analysis, and their unity, silent, unspoken, unwavering, reflected a collective strength we had never anticipated. Humanity had become both enigma and challenge, a species whose potential expanded faster than any predictive model. We observed humans during moments of quiet as well. They built communities in barren environments, shared knowledge and tools across generations, and celebrated achievements that we would have deemed minor or irrelevant. Yet each of these acts reinforced their resilience. The small victories compounded into survival strategies, the lessons of daily life encoded in instinct and culture alike. Their philosophy, it seemed, was survival elevated to art, an elegance forged in adversity, polished by ingenuity, and tempered by cooperation. As we processed these insights, a creeping sense of apprehension took hold. Humans were more than warriors. They were architects of their own evolution, rewriting the rules of engagement before our sensors could record them, reshaping environments before our algorithms could predict them. Their fearlessness was a lens through which we could see the inadequacy of our own measures and methodologies. What we had once considered exceptional in other species, their ingenuity, adaptability, or strategic thinking, was routine for humans. Their baseline was something we could not define, let alone counter. And yet, in this realization, there was awe. Their quiet brilliance, their calculated courage, their relentless drive to turn every challenge into a proving ground. These were qualities that resonated deeply, even with us, observers from a species long accustomed to mastery.
Humanity's brilliance was not loud, it was subtle, patient, and inexorably effective. They did not seek recognition, only survival, only improvement, only the next step in an unending chain of evolution. We recorded everything, cataloged every observation, but the more we analyzed, the less certain we became. Algorithms failed, predictive models crumbled, and our own experience seemed insufficient. Humanity had exposed the limitations not only of our technology, but of our understanding, forcing us to confront a species that would not be measured by conventional metrics. As orbital cameras lingered on their settlements, their faces, their interactions, the truth became undeniable. Humans were not merely a species, they were a force of nature, silent, deliberate, unstoppable in ways we could barely comprehend. They were capable of defying mortality, circumstance, and expectation. They had transformed survival into philosophy, struggle into art, and courage into an unassailable form of intelligence. And somewhere beyond the horizon of observation, they prepared for the next trial, the next challenge, the next crucible. We, their alien instructors and observers, could only watch, humbled, apprehensive, and in awe. For in all our understanding, we had glimpsed the unquantifiable, a species whose fearlessness and ingenuity had no limit, a species whose silence spoke louder than any command, a species whose very existence challenged the order of the galaxy itself. The question lingered, unspoken and unresolved. If humans could conquer the self, the environment, and circumstance with such mastery, what could they accomplish when faced with threats that span entire star systems? The answer was unknown. The only certainty was that humanity's reach, silent, fearless, and unstoppable, had only just begun. The ripple of human victory spread faster than any hyperwave signal could carry. Across the interstellar channels, transmissions of their ingenuity ignited speculation, debate, and a subtle, insidious fear. Worlds that had once considered themselves untouchable began to hesitate. Star systems that had relied on centuries of dominance reconsidered the cost of engagement. And we, the alien instructors, witnesses to these feats, were summoned as advisors. Yet we had no answers, only observations. Observations tinged with awe and an undercurrent of dread we could scarcely articulate. Humans, small and fragile in physical form, reshaped the rules of engagement with breathtaking creativity. Alien technology, designed for their own species' limitations, was reimagined, adapted, and repurposed. Weapons, ships, defensive systems, every piece of equipment became malleable in the hands of Handans. They blended doctrines from competing civilizations, hybridizing strategies that no one species had anticipated. In environments designed to punish the unwary, humans thrived.
Lava fields, toxic atmospheres, Ion storms and gravitational anomalies became playgrounds for their adaptability. We cataloged their maneuvers with meticulous care. Each action was improvisational yet methodical, chaotic yet precise. They could improvise in one moment, calculating probabilities in the next, and anticipate enemy reactions before those enemies themselves understood the implications of their movements. Our simulations collapsed in real time. No algorithm could capture the depth of their insight, the scope of their creativity, or the fluid intelligence with which they turned adversity into advantage. The galaxy began to shift under the silent weight of their influence. Species that had long dismissed humanity as insignificant now approached cautiously, probing communications, testing responses, recalibrating assumptions. What had once been a trivial curiosity became a serious consideration. The human resolve, quiet yet relentless, revealed itself as more than a survival instinct. It was a weapon, a force multiplier capable of exponential impact. One human fleet, unaffiliated with any larger coalition, could destabilize entire systems simply through ingenuity, adaptability, and relentless initiative. We watched from our observation posts as a diplomatic outpost in the Zarshian cluster reconsidered the alignment of its fleet. The humans had infiltrated an abandoned orbital station, repurposing alien defenses to secure supply lines. The Zarshians, confident in their technological superiority, hesitated, unsure if engagement would be containment or catastrophe. Across the galaxy, similar patterns repeated. The humans' influence was silent, subtle, yet unmistakable, like gravity bending the trajectories of everything around it. Our own species, long accustomed to mastery and control, felt the first genuine tremor of vulnerability. We could predict outcomes, enforce rules, and manipulate resources, but humans bypassed all constraints. Each engagement, each decision, each act of ingenuity forced us to confront a hard truth. The humans were not merely participants in galactic affairs, they were catalysts. Their presence recalibrated the balance of power. And yet, the most unnerving realization was this: humanity had done none of it for glory, none of it for conquest. There were no proclamations, no declarations of dominion. Every maneuver was born of necessity, ingenuity, and survival. Victory for humans was not an end, it was an evolution, a continuous refinement of strategy, resilience, and collective intelligence. And this evolution unfolded silently, deliberately, imperceptibly, leaving the galaxy unprepared for its consequences. We, the alien instructors, began to record patterns, predict trajectories, and map influence, but each time we believed we had comprehension, the humans exceeded expectation. Every victory birthed new possibilities, every failure became data for adaptation.
They were rewriting the laws of galactic engagement, without design, without intention, yet with precision and purpose unmatched by any civilization we had known. In the council chambers, debates raged. Senior strategists and military architects argued over the significance of these patterns, some dismissing them as anomalies, others warning of existential consequences. We who had trained them could only watch, our analyses incomplete, our predictions unreliable. Humanity was no longer a subject to be studied, it was a variable that redefined the entire equation. And as we scanned distant sectors, we noticed subtle ripples, fleets adjusting course, systems hesitating, alliances shifting, all in reaction to humans whose physical presence was often minimal, yet whose strategic influence was profound. The galaxy itself seemed to pause, collectively reconsidering assumptions long held as immutable. The humans had become an axis around which events revolved, and even we, their alien instructors, could only record, catalog, and observe with a mixture of reverence and unease. They were small, fragile, and silent, and yet their ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were forces that threatened to overturn centuries of galactic hierarchy. A message arrived from a sector previously assumed secure. Human engineers had adapted an alien propulsion system in ways no design specification allowed, enabling a fleet to traverse previously insurmountable distances in record time. This was not conquest, not aggression, it was intelligence, creativity, and relentless exploration. And yet the ramifications rippled outward, forcing nearby civilizations to reconsider defense postures, supply routes, and alliances. We understood then, more clearly than ever, that humanity's influence would continue to expand, not through brute force, but through innovation, insight, and the inexorable application of ingenuity. The galaxy was recalibrating, often without awareness, in response to their subtle yet unstoppable advance. And so we watched, unable to intervene,
unable to predict, aware only of one terrifying certainty: humans were no longer a species to be measured. They were a force whose trajectory none of us could contain. The balance of power had shifted, silently, invisibly, and the galaxy would never be the same. The galaxy had shifted, and yet nothing seemed to announce it. No trumpet of victory, no declarations of supremacy, no festivals of conquest, only humans, moving quietly through the chaos they had wrought and mastered. Their actions, subtle and deliberate, reshaped entire systems: governance, warfare, diplomacy, even the fragile networks of alliances that had stood unbroken for millennia. Planets once thought secure bowed to patterns initiated not by threat, but by insight, adaptation, and the sheer inevitability of human initiative.
Civilizations that had considered themselves untouchable paused, reconsidered, recalculated, as if the very fabric of the galaxy itself had been altered. From our observation posts, we, their alien instructors, were left in reverent silence. What we had once interpreted as fragility, their small, unassuming forms, their quiet hesitation, was, in fact, deliberate mastery over circumstance. Their simplicity was a facade, their silence a reservoir of calculation and intent. Every gesture, every glance, every measured movement carried the weight of foresight that our most sophisticated simulations could not anticipate. Humans were operating in dimensions of thought, resilience, and influence that none of our kind could replicate. We reviewed the logs repeatedly. Fleets had been rerouted without engagement, hostile negotiations diffused before they escalated, critical resources reallocated in ways that created advantages invisible to conventional analysis. Entire planetary networks bent to human logic, not through coercion, but through ingenuity, strategy, and timing. They had become silent titans, orchestrating outcomes without ceremony, without claim, without fanfare. And the galaxy, unawares, had complied. We could not help but marvel at their unity. Humans retained individuality, yet acted in concert, as though a single mind had multiplied across the stars. Observation revealed micro-strategies embedded in macro actions, courage fused with insight, improvisation entwined with planning. Casualty reports were not lamented, they were integrated, absorbed, converted into refined methods. Their brilliance did not scream, it whispered through every system, every network, every encounter. And yet, for all their dominance, they remained enigmatic. Where other species would have broadcast triumph, humans continued in silence, their focus never diverted. Their restraint was not hesitation, it was power under control. Every initiative, every subtle maneuver reflected a species fully aware of the scope of its capability and deliberately restrained to preserve both opportunity and mystery. The scale of their influence was staggering. Treaties once considered immutable were reshaped, fleets repositioned, economies recalibrated. Civilizations previously untouchable reassessed their priorities, wary of engagement, hesitant to provoke a species whose reach extended beyond comprehension. Across the galaxy, our own species, architects, strategists, instructors, felt the first genuine tremor of awe and fear. We had trained them, we had studied them, and yet even we could not contain or anticipate the full measure of their impact. We recorded every observation, every anomaly, every subtle shift in influence, knowing that future generations of our kind would look upon these records with both caution and reverence. The humans' actions transcended warfare, diplomacy, and survival. They were a masterclass in adaptation, ingenuity, and deliberate action.
They had rewritten the metrics by which civilizations measured success. For the first time, it was clear. Humans were not merely participants in galactic events, they were catalysts. Their ingenuity, bravery, and unyielding spirit had initiated transformations that would resonate for millennia. Systems once considered stable now pulsed to rhythms set by human calculation. Alliances adjusted, conflicts avoided, and opportunities multiplied, all without a single proclamation. We, observers of countless species, felt the profound weight of witnessing evolution in action. The humans had taken the raw material of existence, the environment, the challenges, the limitations imposed by circumstance, and reshaped it into a testament of resilience and foresight. Every calculated silence, every measured act, every moment of stillness had been a prelude to impact. Even as we cataloged their influence, one undeniable truth crystallized. Humans had transcended expectation.
They were no longer merely survivors, soldiers, or strategists. They were architects of consequence, operatives of inevitability, forces whose silent actions reshaped the galaxy without claim or ceremony. Their quiet strength was a paradigm we could neither replicate nor restrain. From the observation towers, we watched as humans continued their work. They explored, adapted, innovated. Entire networks shifted imperceptibly to align with their ingenuity. Planets stabilized under initiatives we could scarcely trace. Fleets acted not in response to command, but in anticipation of human logic. Every maneuver was deliberate, and every effect, measured or immeasurable, resonated across light years. And so we, the alien instructors, remained in awe. Our assumptions about fragility, limitation, and predictability had been shattered. What we had perceived as smallness was power. What we had dismissed as silence was strategy. What we had feared as unpredictability was mastery. Humanity, in all its quiet brilliance, had become a force that redefined the very meaning of survival, influence, and triumph. The galaxy would remember this moment, though perhaps not fully understand it. Across civilizations, across stars, across systems, the lesson was now embedded. Underestimate humanity at your peril. And as we, the instructors, watched them prepare for the next horizon, the next challenge, the next unknown, we felt a mixture of reverence and trepidation. For in the silence of their actions, in the patience of their observation, in the inevitability of their adaptation, humans had become something more than life. They had become a force, quiet yet monumental, destined to echo across the cosmos for millennia. And we, who had witnessed it all, could only record, reflect, and bear witness to the greatness of a species that had transcended expectation.